Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Albums Through the Decades, the show we're doing throughout the month of May. And in the co-captain's chair today, we've got Guitar Hack. What's happening, my friend? How are you?
Doing well, Pete. How are you, sir?
Doing good, doing good. Like I was telling you, I'm just kind of riding the high from a couple of days of some really good shows here on the channel, and that's always good to get the positive feedback from the viewers and the co-stars and all that kind of stuff. Everybody's talking, and
That's
that's a
cool.
good thing. Hit 60,000 subscribers this week. That's a good thing
Yes,
too.
I forgot to mention congratulations. I saw that earlier.
Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty
Awesome.
good. 60,000, 18 million views. I mean, that's
Wow.
pretty crazy. Yeah, I'm feeling the love. I gotta love it. I gotta love it. So
That's all.
today we're going to tackle the catalog through the decades of Aerosmith, who got started in 1973 with the self-titled debut and last released an album not quite a decade ago with Music from Another Dimension. So Hack and I are going to tackle the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. We're going to pick our favorite from each decade. We'll see how we get through this one, right? We got some really good stuff, and then not so good
Uh,
stuff.
yeah.
Exactly. So I'll have Hack kick us off with his pick from the 70s.
Well, the 70s for me is easy because this is my favorite Aerosmith record. I mean, we did an Aerosmith show a couple weeks ago on my channel, and this was my number one. Toys in the Attic. Absolutely love the record. No More, No More, Adam's Apple. And it's got an actual ballad that was written by the band and not outside writers that's actually good. And You See Me Crying. So, yeah, I straight up rock record, great riffs. I mean, Walk This Way, Sweet Emotions got some hits on it too. Yeah, not for me. It's Toys in the Attic for the 70s for sure.
Yeah, I mean the 70s is tough, right? Because you
Oh yeah,
have, for me anyway, there are four standouts
three for me.
and
Yeah,
two others that are really good, maybe
mhm.
not as good as the others. For me, it's almost like there's one that's the default winner, but I want to pick one of the other ones. I'm gonna go with the default winner today, but I mean that's rocks, right? It's
I know.
most people either pick rocks or Toys in the Attic.
Yeah,
And I, for years, kind of debated which one I like better. And
mhm.
in recent years, rocks has just kind of risen up a little bit. But I will tell you something. Get Your Wings and Night in
Yeah,
the Ruts have been making some steady increases, in my opinion, on
yeah.
how high up they rise and rank when you talk about the 70s albums. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if someday I'm just going to be like, you know what? I just enjoy Night in the Ruts better than all the other ones. And I don't know. It may
Yeah.
get to that. It may not. Get Your Wings is fantastic. Toys is great. But, for me, I mean, this has, Back in the Saddle, Last Child is great, Rats in the Cellar, Combination, Sick as a Dog, Nobody's Fault, Get the Let Out, Licking a Promise, Home Tonight. Just some great, great songs.
Yeah.
But there's great songs on all these albums, right? The 70s was just a dynamite decade for this band. And, maybe doing all the drugs is what kind of made them so great. I don't
Well,
know.
like when we did the show a couple weeks ago, we were talking about Night in the Ruts. That's like a hidden gem, man.
It's awesome.
You
Yeah,
know,
it gets better with age, I think. And Night in the Ruts was done under such
yeah.
like turmoil within the band,
The band,
but
yeah,
somehow it worked, right?
Steve Perry ups and walks out. I mean, but it's a great record. It's
Yeah.
got some real good songs on it. So
Yeah, it does. It does. But for now, for the 70s, so we got Toys in the Attic and Rocks. Let's move on to the 80s. What do you got?
well, the 70s obviously was their best decade because now they just sort of start to slow decline. But for the 80s, for me, I picked Pump. Um, I think it's their best 80s record. I know people really dig Permanent Vacation. I kind of always like this album a little more. Young Lust, Fine, Fine. Of course, got the big hit, Janie's Got a Gun. There's still there's Voodoo Medicine Man. There's still enough rock on there. It's not a great record, but it's a good record, and there's still enough elements of Aerosmith, like enough rock elements, Aerosmith to keep me interested. So, yeah, I definitely went with Pump for the 80s.
I'm going to move away from the big albums from the 80s because I'm not a huge fan. I like some select songs here and there, but for me, this was a battle between Rockin' a Hard Place and Done with Mirrors, which I think still are pretty gritty Aerosmith albums. Obviously, Rockin' a Hard Place is without Joe Perry
Yeah.
and Brad Whitford. Done with Mirrors got the gang back together. I'm ultimately going to go with that.
Mm,
You know what it is? Half the songs on here I really like a lot. The other half are okay. I mean, Let the Music Do the Talking. Obviously, that's a Joe song. that they brought over from his
Brought over,
Suicide
yeah.
project. My Fist, Your Face is terrific. Shame on You, The Reason a Dog. Sheila's pretty good. Gypsy Boots, I like. She's on Fire is quite good. You know, the Hop in Darkness, okay songs. But I'm gonna have this one edge. Rocking a Hard Place for me. But either one is good. I know a lot of people love Pump and a lot of people love Permanent Vacation. Those albums were huge for a reason, right? Not
Yep.
really my kind of thing when I go reach for Aerosmith. But so for the 80s, we got Pump and we got Done with Mirrors. Now we get into the really interesting part of the discussion, the 90s.
Yeah, when they turned into almost a complete pop band. But Get a Grip. There's still some rock in there. Eat the Rich, Living on the Edge, Fever, Shut Up and Dance. It's a pretty decent rock album of the 90s records. And then they just got way too many ballads and trying to get into the top 40. But that record, again, still had some of that Aerosmith fire, some of that edge. So, yeah, for me, it's got to be Get a Grip for the 90s.
I'm going to give it to Get a Grip as well. Again, I'm not a fan of this album, but Eat the Rich, Living on the Edge, pretty good songs. Shut Up and Dance is kind of fun, co-written by Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw. I actually was just listening to this album recently, the Old Damn Yankees. I like both of those guys. Yeah, I mean, a couple good tracks. Overall, it doesn't do a hell of a lot for me. But when you look at like what it's up against in that game, right? I mean, it's like that's why it's a no-brainer for me, because I am certainly not going to pick Nine Lives, which I think is just a terrible album. Yeah. So that's my pick from the 90s. So we both got Get a Grip there, and now we move into the 2000s. Gets even more interesting. And good luck even making a choice here, right? It's just like,
yeah, well, I had to go with Just Push Play. I mean, it's gonna be real slim pickings. Just Push Play, Under My Skin's okay. I mean, that's about it. There's just too many ballads. It's too poppy. It's I don't know, they totally lost they're not Aerosmith anymore. They totally lost their rock edge. They don't have that sort of blues thing going anymore. Yeah. They lost it. So, but we're not picking the best. It's more like the lesser of all evils, and I'm picking.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting there, how they kind of lost their blues and their rock edge. That's the only reason why I'm going to give my pick for the 2000s to Honkin' on Bobo, 2004, because at least that is like, all right, we're going to do some blues and blues rock covers, and it's not even really good at that either.
I know it's not.
But at least they're like playing their guitars, and they're just kind of, I don't know. I honestly don't like either of the albums we're talking about here. But I remember when Honkin' a Bobo came out, people were like, oh, they're getting back to their kind of roots and all that kind of stuff. And then I listened to it and I was like,
oh my God,
really? I'm like, I don't hear it, but all right. So for me, it's going to win by default, just because at least they're attempting to be kind of bluesy and raunchy again. I don't think it's a very good album either. I think both of them are pretty much stinkers. But
I love that comment you made, when you're trying to justify record by saying at least they're still playing guitars.
I know, right? Doesn't say much.
When you hit that low, it's like, how much lower can you go, right? At least he's still singing,
Give him credit for just showing up, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my God, that's hilarious.
So in the 2010s, we only have one. Maybe that's a good thing, right? I don't know. Yeah. Music from Another Dimension from 2012. Obviously, that's going to win for both of us. Again, I'm not a fan.
It's strangely enough, though, it's got a little more rock to it than the than say Push Play. I'm just reading my notes here. Beautiful is okay. Love Her a Lot. It's not a bad song. Yeah, it has at least a little bit of rock, but then they also there's a lot of ballads, and then there's that line where there's that one song with Carrie Underwood, they start going into the country thing, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah, now you know why you got that country crossover album from Steve.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was a sign of things to come.
Yeah, and there's a lot of songs on this album, and I don't find most of it interesting.
No.
Out Go the Lights, Legendary Child, maybe Freedom Fighter. I don't know. It doesn't quite do it, but it's the only one, so that wins by default, right?
Yeah.
So.
Hey, at least they're playing guitars.
They are. They are. You know, it's just funny because, and I'm not trying to pick on Aerosmith here because there are other bands, legacy bands that have fallen into the same trap. But I find it amazing. I mean, I just did a show recently on Yes, right? We did one of these shows for Yes, and then you get to like the '90s and the 2000s albums, and it's just like, how did this band just forget how to at least record something that's even remotely similar to
Right.
capturing the majesty that they did? I mean, granted, I know people get older, things change. I get it. But the problem is there are tons of bands out there who've been around since the 60s, 70s, and the 80s who are putting out killer albums really late in the game. I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, Judas Priest for one.
Judas Priest. I was just gonna say, the other end of the spectrum, you got Judas Priest, who put out Firepower, which is arguably, in my opinion, right up there, just as good as a Screaming for Vengeance.
Yeah, but they're not the only ones. I mean, you got like Uriah Heep putting out great albums, Saxon, Deep Purple, you know, Maiden still pumping out good albums. You know, you could go across a lot of different bands. You know, Rush up until they retired, we're still putting out great albums. So you got all these old legacy bands who are still putting out stuff that does their legacy proud.
Yeah.
And then I don't understand why Aerosmith and Yes, and there's a few more who just they keep cranking out these albums that just like they're just bland and uninteresting. And is it that hard? And again, you know, we talked earlier about maybe Aerosmith needs to start drinking and snorting coke again to get the fire back. I don't know, because it's kind of odd that once they got clean, that's when all this started, right? So I don't know. We're having a little fun at Aerosmith's expense here. I know a lot of people love these albums, and that's cool.
Yeah,
but
but you know what it is. I'll tell you the thing about Aerosmith. It's because the '70s were so good. That's, you know what I mean. It's like because they're coming off such a, you know, literal high.
Yeah.
You know, and then they start to sort of decline as they clean up, and I know I think it's almost like, you know, they just wanted to be a pop band. They just wanted to want to be Bon Jovi. You know, they want to get records you know, on the radio, and they wanted to sell, you know, to do ballads and bring in outside writers and all the stuff that dilutes what they were in the '70s, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah. But, and as we've seen throughout the years, especially the last, you know, 30 plus years, is that a lot of people, and I'm talking about a lot of people, came on board with Aerosmith in the '80s with all those big hits. And that's what they know, and that's what they love. And the '70s is kind of like, yeah, that's the old stuff they did, but this is what I really love. So it's just really interesting. But you also have to wonder too, and maybe folks who are watching can put it in the comments, how many of you watching who came on board with Aerosmith with those, you know, Permanent Vacation and Pump and those really big albums, how many are still listening to the Honkin' at Bobo's and know those last couple of albums, right? Like, do you really like those? I guess that's my question, because to me, they're all kind of stinkers. But I'm wondering how the newer fans, the last 30 years, how they like those last couple albums, and if there's anything interesting there for them. That's what would be interesting to find out.
Well, that's a good point, because you're talking about really people who got into them once they got on MTV, right? You know, so there's that whole generation, like all those videos, because they put out tons of videos, right? You know, the Pump record, the Get a Grip record, they had like, you know, 3-4 videos, or at least 2 or 3 videos depending. And people that got into them at that point, now maybe never listened to the '70s stuff, and this is their jam, you know. But
yeah,
you never know.
Yeah, it's two totally different generations. It's interesting how that happens. You know, when you have an older band who kind of hits that stride later on with a completely different sound that really works for the masses, right? Because we've seen a lot of bands, older bands, who change their sound, and it doesn't quite work out that way. You can look at Genesis, also kind of did the same thing.
Oh yeah,
you know, Genesis totally revamped their approach and became like this amazing mega pop band, which pissed off a lot of the early, you know, fans, because all of a sudden they're not really a prog band anymore. And Aerosmith kind of did the same thing, but it didn't hurt their wallets, right?
No. They sold a lot of records in the '80s and '90s. It definitely did.
Yeah,
the most.
So there you have it, everybody. Favorite albums through the decades for Aerosmith. Please rank them. You know, give us your favorites from each decade: the '70s, the '80s, the '90s, 2000s, and 2010s. Curious to see what everybody comes up with. Remember, there's no right or wrong answers here. You know, everybody loves what they love and dislikes what they dislike. So that's just the way it is, right? So I want to thank Guitar Hack for coming on, helping out once again today. What you got coming up on your channel, my friend?
So tonight at 8 p.m., if this airs Wednesday night, I got my regular weekly show, 8 p.m. Eastern. I do a weekly show every Wednesday, and I've got original music out there too on my channel if you want to check that out. And I just got a new piece of gear that I'll be doing a review and a demo on this week too. So that's what's coming up on my channel in the next few days.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So everybody make sure you go check out Hack's channel. And while you're at it, visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. For Guitar Hack, I am Pete Pardo. Make sure you put your picks for Aerosmith albums through the decades in the comments below. And we'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.